Hello there. Welcome once again to part of our communications session, and our communications session talks also about effective presentation skills. Indeed, as a manager and an executive in business, there are times when you will need to be able to present ideas or present results or present reports, etc., to your team or to other people, and also present proposals to prospective clients. So in this session on effective presentation skills and the way to communicate effectively to a group, we're going to take you through all the ins and outs of how you can prepare yourself, how you can be a better presenter, how you can overcome nerves, and how you can prepare your PowerPoint for the greatest effect on your audience. Are you involved in many presentations? I'm sure you are. Presentations take the form of small meeting groups or focus groups, talking to a series of customers or talking to the board of directors. It can take the form of many, many things in terms of who you present to and why you're presenting a particular subject. So let's start off with effective presentation skills. How are your skills? Are you afraid when you have to speak in front of people? How do you fare when you're delivering your information? Do you do it rather well? Or do you think that you might be able to do it a bit better? Let's take a look at the impact of a skillful presenter so that we're clear in our mind as to exactly what result you are likely to gain if you present well and skillfully. First up, people will give you quite a lot of credibility if you are seen to be skillful and professional. And that's a good thing to have. People believe in you, they do not doubt you, they trust you, and more or less take what you say as being fairly truthful and very much the real picture. If you skillfully present as well, then you tend to give a bit of authority when you speak, and so therefore you affect the audience in that way as well. You speak with a certain level of authority that elevates perhaps your standing or your position or what people actually think about you. The impact of a skillful presenter can also be one of enthusiasm. Quite often you may have seen people who are very enthusiastic, not overly, but mildly enthusiastic about what they're talking about, and therefore that comes across and it injects enthusiasm also into the audience. This is a very good result to have. The other impact that a good presentation could bring is being one of entertainment. People do like to be entertained. So if you can present well, you have the ability to entertain your audience, and that wins them, and that brings them back again and again. You will also come across as being quite dynamic if you are skillful and experienced in presentation work. And this is also a good plus. It's a plus for the audience and a plus for you. And finally, you may come across as being quite exciting, and therefore people want to come and listen to you more and more. The next time that you're in town or the next time you have to prepare something for that particular client, people will come because they know that you give exciting presentations. So there are many benefits to being a skillful presenter. But presenting takes quite a lot of effort for some people. A lot of it starts, first of all, with the way that you actually talk to yourself and how you perceive yourself. Your thoughts and your feelings, all the thoughts and the feelings that there are inside of you as you begin to present, come out in your actions and behaviors. This is something to be very mindful of when you do indeed present anything. Your thoughts impact your feelings impact your actions and your behaviors in front of your audience, and these have an impact on the results of your presentation. So this sequence is what happens when you begin to give your presentation. It's really quite straightforward, but it's something that you need to note. What is the result of my thoughts that begin the whole process? What's going to be the result? Will it be positive or will it be negative? Will I come away with a great feeling and my audience comes away with a great feeling? Or am I going to come away with a negative feeling that I could have done better? And my audience may go away thinking, that wasn't so crash hot, that wasn't really very exciting or informative. So this is the beginning process, and it starts with you. You're the one standing up there. So this sequence is very important to notice the impact that comes from all of these parts of the sequence. Presenters and speakers, sometimes we call them the same thing. Sometimes presenting is in a more informal situation and speaking is in a more formal environment, perhaps to a larger group of people. However, speaking is the number one fear for most people who have to do it. It's something that they really do not look forward to. And most speakers are really made from the experiences and the practice they've had in speaking, rather than being born that way. Of course, there are people who have great talent and who have what we call a certain kind of gift, but that's not the majority. That's just a small number. So for the rest of us who don't have that gift or that natural talent, then we have to really try to work hard at it. And we have to learn how to be better at speaking, either in a public environment, public situation, or speaking as a presenter in a meeting situation or to an audience. There are many things, actually, that presenters do tend to do wrong. And perhaps we will go through these and you can take note as we talk about them. For example, some speakers or presenters write out every single detail of their presentation in full length, every single word that they're going to say. And really, that's not necessary to do. The idea is that you write out key points, and we'll go through that a little bit later. So if you find that you're tediously sitting down for hours and hours writing out your presentation, the whole thing, then that is not really going to help you to remember it and to be able to stand up there and speak it as well as you'd like to. It may be too much work. Perhaps just highlighting the key points on paper and a few notes are a better idea. Then you can read from those key points when you are in front of your audience. When you write everything out in full detail, you're never going to be able to find the key points that you want to refer to. A lot of presenters, actually they read instead of communicate. If they're using PowerPoint, for example, or if they do have notes, having written them out in long form or short form, standing up and reading them instead of actually looking at the audience and communicating and expressing these ideas is something that is not going to make your presentation go along too well. People will not be interested. They will certainly get bored and they want to see your face. They don't want to just see the top of your head while you're reading through the presentation. And also, this kind of tactic means that you're not prepared, that you don't know your stuff, that you haven't memorized the facts and the information about which you are speaking. Many presenters also talk too quickly. They talk too fast, and they don't give the audience time to absorb what they are saying. They come out sounding like a machine gun, spraying words all over the place. And so this too is an area of concern if it's one of your habits. Sometimes presenters also use a dull voice. They're not quite aware that their voice is uninteresting. And when it's dull, then the audience feels lethargic. They don't feel interested as well. And so there needs to be more colour in the voice, more tone. And we're going to go through some of these points a little bit later on. It could be said too that quite often you see irritating mannerisms coming from the presenter. Some people perhaps pull their ear as they speak, or fiddle with their collar, or fiddle with things about themselves that create irritation to the viewer. It could be also that presenters are very self-conscious. They become self-conscious once they're on stage, and therefore they become rather shy and subdued. And this too is something that's going to inhibit the success of your presentation. A very big problem that does exist if you have this is if you don't give eye contact. People want to see your face. They want to see your eyes, and your eyes tell a lot about what you're thinking and feeling. So please remember that eye contact is an essential part to a successful presentation. And finally, it could be that presentations are overloaded with too much information, way too much. And when that happens, well, the listener gets full. The viewers are full up to here. They can't absorb anything more, and it's useless. It's pointless. Do you find that you do some of these things? Are these some of your habits? Let's have a look at presentations. And the first thing we're going to look at here is podium panic. Some people think that the thought of actually standing up in front of a group of people is far more frightening than falling off a cliff, or far more frightening than not having enough money in your pocket, or snakes, or even death. They are terrified. And when people are terrified, they clam up. They are unable to function, unable to actually be comfortable and proceed with a communication. Have you seen this happen where people panic? Suddenly they're lost for words. Suddenly they have no way to follow through to the next step, and they look around and they are expressionless. How do you deal with this? Perhaps it doesn't happen in a large group. Perhaps it also happens in just a small group of people. So if podium panic or presentation panic sets in, there may be ways that you can try to overcome them or overcome that panic. Just remember a few points here. Audiences are usually fairly forgiving, mostly. That means that they understand, they know what you're probably going through, and they do try to help you along the way. So, as a general rule, audiences are fairly good that way. Nervousness, too, is usually invisible, unless it's a drastic situation or you are a drastic case. But if you are nervous, sometimes it's not as visible as you think it is. Of course, that's if you're holding a piece of paper and you're trying to read and your hands are trembling, then of course that is something that's visible. So one thing you can do there is put that paper down on a desk or on the podium, on the lectern, on the podium. Dealing with podium panic? Another thing you can do is just to be yourself and be in your comfort zone. Start off with how you are feeling comfortable. If it's comfortable that you open up with a very small remark about something that happened to you on the way to the presentation, then start that way, if that relaxes you, if that makes you feel comfortable. Check out a lot of these techniques as well. You know, you can go and check out the room in advance. And when you've gone to the room in advance, you've got a feel for the surroundings. You're not walking into a strange area, and therefore you might be able to reduce your panic a little in terms of doing that. You're becoming more familiar with what's around you and the people who are there to support you, etc. That's one way to calm yourself down and stop that panic. Another thing is to concentrate on the message. Try not to focus on being nervous. Focus on being afraid. Concentrate on what the message is that you want to convey to this group of people today. You can begin with a slow, well-prepared introduction and then have a confident and clear conclusion. So start out that way, and that will help you reduce the panic that's starting to set in. Does this sound as though they are possible to do to you? How do you feel about these things? As we go through this, I want you to start to think about your own personal behavior and whether you are afraid when you stand up there on the platform, or whether you turn into a piece of jelly when you're up there in front of people. Another way, perhaps it's the best way to actually prepare for podium panic and overcome it, is to be prepared and to practice. We're going to go through this in a little bit more detail as we progress, but being prepared and practicing is definitely a way that will reduce your panic and your fears. So, let's look at how you handle those nerves. We've talked about podium panic. Now, let's start to work on the nerves. Rehearse in advance. This is important if you can set aside time to rehearse in advance, not 5 minutes before or half an hour before, but I'm talking about way in advance of this meeting or of this presentation. The more time you give yourself in advance to prepare, then if you see mistakes, you can spend time working on those mistakes. And then you're going to end up with a very polished presentation. Makes sense, doesn't it? Then the idea is, in order to handle your nerves, is to prepare for the worst case scenario. The worst thing, what is the worst thing that can happen in your presentation? Maybe it's the awkward questions. Perhaps that's the thing that makes you the most afraid. So if that is the situation, then really work hard to prepare for those awkward questions. Set them in your mind. Prepare in advance. Think of all the horrible questions, all the difficult questions that might come to you, and prepare for them. And then that may take away your nerves, take away your fear that you have when you're up there doing a presentation. In handling your nerves, try to relax. Do some deep breathing. Arrive in adequate time. Don't hold pages up in front of you. As I said before, if you are nervous, these pages will jiggle around and you will look quite really ridiculous. People will really see it then. And also, position yourself comfortably. If you're going to be sitting through this presentation, then that's fine, or standing, but make sure that you find a very comfortable position where you can stand. And that will lessen your nerves. Remember too that your audience are not focused on you. They're more interested really in the information. They do watch you though. They do see things about you. But they also are there for the reason of gaining information. They're there for the subject of the meeting. So try to remember that. That may help you as well. And finally, have a glass of water at hand. Of course, be careful when you pick that glass of water up. Don't shake it if you have a very shaky hand. But usually have a glass of water, and that may help your throat and help you take a sip and a pause. And this kind of technique of sipping water from time to time can manage your nerves better. Remember, when you're up there giving your presentation, information is communicated in 3 key ways. It's communicated visually, through your body language, through your facial expressions, through the way that you stand, the way that you look at your audience, and that accounts for the major part of the impact of communication. 55% of the information is perceived through your visual communication. Then we come down to the vocal communication, and 38% of the information is perceived mostly by how you have said it, whether you have been slow-paced, steady in your words, using colour and intonation in your voice, and whether you are using attitude that is reflected in the way that you use your voice. Whether you're using sounds that are making the audience feel comfortable and warm, the way you actually speak. All of these vocal communication skills account for 38% of the information being received. And finally, the actual content, the verbal communication that you have, 7% of that is the impact of your verbal communication, 7%. So we see that your personal body language and the way you sound with your voice have the greatest amount of impact on your audience. So when you're up there, standing in front of your group, standing in front of 20, 30, 100 people, things that are visual are the way that you stand, your posture, and whether you lean on one foot, move to the other side, stand on another foot, whether your shoulders are straight or whether they are slouched in a position that looks as though you're tired and exhausted. Your stance and your posture are very visual factors, and people take note of it. People sense your posture. They also look at your body movement. They look at how you move from the one side of the room to the other, which you should do slowly. They look at how you walk to the podium. They look at how you sit and stand and move your papers. These are all visual factors that they take note of. Next up, they look at the way you use your hands. They look at these things, your hands and your gestures, how you hold your arms, where you actually put your hands. They notice these, and your hands and your body language in the total picture send back a message to the audience. It goes without saying that they also are, of course, looking at your facial expressions. The face is where we actually put our gaze first. When we meet somebody, we always come to the face mostly. And so that means your facial expressions are important. You don't need to walk up to the podium or to the front of the room with a scowl or a frown on your face, because that will send out the wrong message. Your eye contact as well. Remember to gaze at the audience, not stare at them 100% of the time, but shift your gaze around the room from place to place, person to person, and start looking at somebody that perhaps you're comfortable with first, or maybe it's somebody you know. So center your gaze there and then move it around and share it with your audience as best you can. So all of these factors are the visual part of your communication and your presentation skills. The benefits of good body language, of good visual presentation, in terms of the way you move your body, is that it creates credibility for you. You feel good if you walk up to that area and you feel confident with the way that you're standing and the way that you walk and speak, etc., then you gain credibility. You look professional and you get the feeling that you are. You can gain and hold the attention of the audience through very good body language. You can be very powerful, and indeed I'm sure you have seen speakers in history who have been very powerful purely because of their particular body language. They have held the attention of their audience and nobody has said a word. They just concentrated on the speaker. Having good body language also reduces your nervousness because you're increasing your confidence. It supports also what is being said. Your body language and the information that you're imparting to your audience, well, one supports the other. The body language supports the actual content of your presentation. And finally, good body language minimizes distractions to the participants in the audience. That means that they are focused on you. They are not looking away. They are not looking at what you're shuffling about with your feet or what you're doing with your fingers, etc. So good body language has very great and powerful benefits. Some no-nos, things not to do with body language. Really try not to lean on things. You have posture, you have a body, stand up straight and support yourself. Don't rock or sway in a place. You might tend to rock the audience to sleep if you do that, and it can be quite distracting. Don't stand like a piece of stone where you are totally immobile and you have no movement whatsoever. People might want to rush up and touch to see if you're real or not. Don't use the same gesture repeatedly. If you have a tendency to use one hand and use it like this when you're talking, if you repeatedly use it like that, it is something that's going to be quite negative and it becomes a bit distracting. Don't, of course, sit there and look at your fingernails or bite them. I have seen this actually happen in some presentations. They've been informal presentations, but it really is not going to give a very good impact on the audience. Some other no-nos that are general and perhaps you need to take note of is don't really cross your arms in front of your chest when you're in front of a group. It tends to be a rather aggressive kind of stance. Some people say that they feel comfortable standing that way. Well, that may be true. Perhaps you could lighten it up a bit, and if you do it once, then realize just take your arms away and try to relax a little bit more with some different gestures. But if you stand with your arms crossed in front of your chest the whole time, it does look very static and uncaring towards the audience. It's as if you're closing yourself off. Try not to use gestures that are very unnatural or obvious or too contrived. For example, pointing at people or things that have been used in movies that you have picked up on. If you want perhaps somebody to stop talking, I know that this means time out. It's a rather contrived kind of gesture. Try not to use those sorts of things. It's better to use your voice and explain what you want to say. Also, remember, don't chew any gum or eat candy. Maybe the audience has candy or they have some refreshments in the room, but you as the presenter are not really in the position at the front of the room to sit and eat along with the audience or chew gum. If that is a habit you have, then that's one definite no-no. It's a definite habit you need to change. If you have a tendency to clip or tap your pen or pencil or pointer, try to stop those mannerisms as well. They can be rather distracting and annoying to a lot of people. And finally, the last set of no-nos in our body language part is don't lean into the microphone. If the microphone is there and you're leaning in like this, you should really have the microphone prepared and checked beforehand so as it's at a comfortable distance from you and so that you know that you are being heard and you've tested it before. So don't really lean into it. It shows that you haven't really prepared yourself. If you do have a lot of notes, don't shuffle them unnecessarily. You have to minimize the amount of paper you have in front of you, and you have to sort it out so it's all in order. If you're shuffling your notes all the time, perhaps it's a sign of your eccentricity, I'm not sure, but really it means that you get lost and you're not really prepared. Up there on the podium, don't fiddle about with your clothing or your buttons or your collar or your tie or, adjust things as you're in front of the audience. You should do that beforehand in the dressing room or in the ladies or the gents. That's something you need to be careful of too. Naturally, you might do it, but don't do it in front of everybody. Do it way before you actually get up in front of your audience. This is one I have seen done, cracking knuckles. I have seen presenters crack knuckles, so I entered it into this program. Please don't crack your knuckles. I know, and I've worked in Asia a long time, that cracking knuckles is quite a natural thing for some people to do, and doing it though in front of an audience is just a little bit disconcerting. And so is jangling keys in your pocket. If you've got keys in your pocket, just take them out, or don't put your hands in your pockets anyway. So here we have some general no-nos about body language. One thing I would like to say, though, is do try to be natural. You have here a very long list of things not to do, but it is important that you convey your personality as well. And sometimes your personality may mean that you move your hands around a little bit, or you like to move your head to the side, or you have some tendencies in the way you present yourself. Just try to moderate things if you can. Don't be extreme. If you're up there in front of people and you are extreme, then they will perceive you as even more extreme. So moderate those behaviors that you have, which are part of you, and see how you can go from there. One thing we can say about eye contact, which is a very important part of your body language, is always keep your audience within your sight. Never really take your gaze off the audience if that is possible. You may have to refer to something on the table from time to time, but mostly never really let your audience out of your sight during the presentation. It keeps your mind in focus. It keeps you in the place that you are. It keeps you mindful of the fact that you are speaking to a group of people. When you are looking your audience in the eye, it makes them feel that they are influencing what you say. So they feel important. They feel drawn into the conversation. So you're looking at them, they're looking at you, and you feel suddenly there is a connection. Eye contact also makes the presentation seem like it's a conversation as well. If you're looking at people, then they feel that they're much more involved and that they're part of the conversation. Now we switch to vocal factors. And this is where your voice comes into play. What do you think about your voice, by the way? Do you speak in a monotone? Do you speak rather loudly? Is that a natural tendency you have? Do you speak quickly? Are you a fast speaker, or do you tend to speak in a moderate fashion? All of these things are quite important when we're talking about voice. And volume is certainly one of the important things you need to look at. If you speak too softly, no one is going to hear you. So you do need to have a reasonable volume to your voice. The rate, you need to keep it at an even pace. Sometimes when things get a bit excited, you may race a little bit, but you do need to come back to a more moderate pace so that people are not lost from your conversation. Inflection as well. Inflection, this is how you actually moderate the way that you speak, whether your voice is up or down, whether you're a monotone or full of tones, whether you have various tones in your voice, so there is colour. And also, do you use pausing and fillers? Pausing, having silence, is also a very good tool to use when you're giving presentations. So we have a lot of factors that are attached to your voice. Your voice has to be understood. It must be able to be understood. You cannot mumble. You cannot cloud your voice. You have to articulate very clearly. That means say your words in a very clear expression and pronounce the words properly. This is very important to remember. If you're talking to people and you're using names of places or names of people. You must know how to pronounce all of these things very, very carefully and correctly. When you're using your voice, remember, use pausing and think of also the expressions that you're going to come out with. Are they the standard stock expressions? Do they sound a little bit corny? Do they sound contrived? Be careful too that the level of grammar that you are using is correct. It's a good level. Make sure that your grammar is correct when you are speaking to your audience. And vary your voice. Vary the rate. Sometimes you may speak a little bit quicker than at other times. This adds character. This adds an interest into your voice and the way you are saying things. And we also talked about volume, pitch or tone, and emphasis. Sometimes you may need to emphasize things, just as I am showing you here. And therefore, you may slow down a little bit and break things up so as you emphasize certain parts of a word or certain parts of a sentence. So your voice, it's a very important part of your vocal ability. We talked about nerves in the beginning of this program, and I'd just like to add a few more things about nerves and about your fear. Nerves and fear, are they the same thing? Well, sometimes people might say that fear is a little bit deeper. Everyone is actually afraid of something or another. But the thing is, everyone can learn to control it. So if you can build up a strategy to control fear, then all of your communication ability, your body language, your vocal factors of your communication will be much more smooth. Then all of the things that you do in your presentation will be far smoother if you know how to eliminate fear. So try to develop a strategy to control your fear. One strategy you can develop is to start with the 3 Ps. If you follow this strategy, then you are going to have no fear whatsoever because you're going to feel on top of the world when you present. So the idea with the 3 Ps is to plan your presentation, practice your presentation, and prepare yourself. This is why presenting is not really something you can do 5 minutes beforehand. Some people, as I say, have a natural gift for that, but most people do not. So therefore, plan, practice, and prepare yourself. If you follow this strategy, you are going to eliminate that fear that stands beside us when we're having to give presentations. So plan it, and plan it well. Do not wing it, we say. Do not think you know it all and just get in there and try to do your best with what you've got up here. That may work sometimes. However, the more you plan and prepare your presentation, the better you're going to be when you give it. So create an outline and consider your introduction. Consider the body of your subject and the conclusion. Consider how to get attention, how to express the purpose of your presentation. And think of the body in terms of all your main ideas. And later in your conclusion, restate those key ideas as you sum up and as you close your presentation. So planning is important. Practice your presentation. Once you've planned it, once you've got it in place, practice, practice, practice. Spend an hour for every 2 minutes of speaking to practice your presentation. You may think that is outrageous and too extreme. But actually, if you are starting off in presenting things, then it's really a good habit to get into, to really practice well. And the more you practice, do you know what happens? The more you begin to remember. And when you remember things, then you don't need to use notes so much, and you have more confidence when you speak. So really, practice, practice, practice is going to help you eliminate fear and be a great presenter. Practice also means to include planning as well. As you are practicing, include your planning for the next step along the way. And prepare yourself. Arrive early. Don't be late. Always be there ahead of time. Depending on your experience, you can gauge how much time you should be there ahead of the audience. But I would think it could be up to an hour before, or half an hour before, or 20 minutes before. If you cut it very close to the time that the presentation is going to open, then you may end up with a few problems, unless you are very, very experienced in presenting. Meet as many people too. As you see the audience arriving, meet as many people as you can and make them your friends. Really be kind, be nice, be polite. Don't show your fear. Walk around and network and talk and have that cup of coffee and mingle. This is a very good way to prepare yourself, and you're getting to know who the people are who are out there in the foyer or the lobby and who are going to be your audience in the next half an hour. Meet the person who is introducing you. Normally you might have somebody who can introduce you and talk a little bit about you. So meet them, and that will make you feel a lot better. It will take away some of that fear. Also give them your biodata so they know who you are. They don't have to keep asking, or they don't miss out on some of the important parts of your experience, so to speak. And make sure that they can pronounce your name correctly. If when you're meeting them in the first part of the program before it starts, then you'll be able to understand if they can say your name clearly and correctly or not. This sometimes happens when you're dealing in different cultures, where the subject matter is one where different people from various countries around the world are meeting, or different offices in different regions are meeting. So try to remember that how you pronounce, or how your name is pronounced, is very, very important. The next thing you can do is start to visualize your success. Take 2 or 3 minutes a day to visualize being successful in your presentation. When you are doing your practicing, when you are rehearsing, start to visualize yourself being very effective, being very good up there on the stage. See yourself as being successful and getting through that presentation in a very effective way. Visualize the audience appreciating your effort, visualizing them applauding and really saying that they're very thankful for your talk or your speech. Feel confident, even if you are not confident inside yourself. Start to feel it. If you begin to feel it, and you walk in a confident way, and you sit in a confident way, and you see yourself as being confident, and begin to practice confidently and feel this confidence, then that is going to help you through your presentation and is part of the visualization of success that's going to help you overcome your fear. Remember, the audience wants you to succeed. They don't want you to fail, so they're there with you. They're actually supporting you along the way. So these things, if you start to visualize them and feel them, can really help you overcome that fear that sometimes grips you. Remember, it's not about you. The audience is thinking, what's in it for me? It's not only about you. They are wanting something also from this speech. So focus on what's in it for them. You need to give them something. You need to concentrate on the benefits you are giving them, not on yourself and not on your nerves. Nervousness doesn't show also as much as you feel it. Remember that point. So never really tell the audience that you're feeling nervous. Never reveal negative information. So that means don't stand up there and say, it's good to be here with you today. I'm a little bit nervous because I don't usually make presentations. That's not the way to go. That is not the thing to do. Never tell them you are nervous, and never reveal negative information about yourself in the presentation. Keep your audience involved. What's in it for them? They need to be involved. Use some exercises, some fun, some questions. Role-playing, for example. If you're having a meeting with your staff, you can bring in role-playing or pair work or pair activities. Make them want to benefit from this. Take the attention off yourself and put it on your audience. That's a technique that you can use, and that will eliminate fear and really give the audience quite a lot of benefit as well. You can develop proper ways to breathe. Breathing is sometimes a common error. We don't breathe enough. We don't breathe in a controlled way. We don't inhale deeply enough. We think we have to rush, and therefore we don't breathe. So take time to breathe before your presentation. Think about that. Stand at the back of the room before everybody comes in and control your breathing. Have a few minutes to yourself where you can breathe in and you can breathe out. Not breathing in like that. That's not what I mean. I mean breathe in a controlled way where it can relax you, where it can calm you and reduce anxiety. I quite often do this when I have a large group to speak to. Smaller groups, I'm not really needing to spend too much time on this because I have had a lot of experience. But when it comes to larger numbers, 50 people or up, I do like to have a bit of quiet time to myself to stand and breathe and relax my anxiety. Yes, even the most experienced speakers and presenters do have anxiety, and sometimes it's a good thing. Now we come to the next part of how to present well, how to be an effective presenter. And this is concerned with the actual presentation format. And that depends on the audience and the reason for your presentation. Sometimes your presentation can be one that is supposed to inform, or it could be one that is meant to persuade people, or it could also be something that's done just on the spur of the moment without any preparation in advance. It's something that perhaps you need to be ready to handle. This can crop up from time to time where you are required just to talk to people without any notice in advance. So the presentation format that you will use will depend on your audience and the reason for that presentation. Basically, there are 4 types of presentations that are given. They could be things that have a lot of detail in them and things that are more persuasive in content, not having that much thorough detail, but ones where they need to persuade and convince an audience of something. So you have presentations that have more facts, figures, details, reports, information, etc., and others where it's more important to talk about the issue and convince and influence the audience. And depending on those, they can be ones where they are more oral rather than written using PowerPoint, etc. They could be presentations that are meant to provide instruction in a way, taking people through a set of instructions and guidelines. They could be sales-oriented presentations or things where you are explaining how things need to be done. Sales presentations are there for you maybe to sell an idea or suggest to clients or upper management better ways of selling product, to persuade perhaps for an action or belief in something as well. Explanatory types of presentations are where you need to give an overall perspective of something and identify new things. It does not require detail and persuasion, but it's there really just to share some information or renewed information and understanding of the subject. Instructional presentations are there when you want to teach others how to use something like a new piece of hardware, for example. So you go through detailed audience participation and involvement. People follow guidelines, perhaps they follow a simulation, etc. And an oral presentation is where you're probably reporting in an oral way to bring the audience up to date on something. It could be that they're very familiar on those subjects already, but you need to focus just on an update, and therefore facts and figures are there. They don't really need very much persuasive effort. Sometimes when we present, we have a generic format, which is that you introduce the subject, you tell the audience about it, and then you tell them what you want to remember, the key points. The introduction, the body, and then the conclusion. This is the usual way that we give our presentations, as I've explained a little bit earlier in this session. So the introduction is very important. The introduction is meant to be an attention getter. Here, if you involve people in this introduction, then you are going to get their attention much, much more. The purpose of the introduction is also to explain why you are talking about this subject. Why are you here standing in front of this group of people? And the preview is also important of the agenda, the roadmap, so to speak, of what is going to happen in that presentation. So these are the parts of the introduction. Try to catch your audience, give them the reasons why you're there, and give them a preview as to what's going to happen. Next up comes the body. And here you would develop, depending on the intensity of your subject or the length that you're going to be speaking for, here you would develop 2 or 3 main points. Perhaps there are several more points depending on, as I said, your subject matter. And finally we do come to the conclusion, where you review what has been discussed and you summarize key things. Don't make the mistake of repeating almost everything you said in the summary or the conclusion. You need to just look at the key things and highlight them. It's important too that you need a very strong concluding statement. This way you will have the audience going away remembering what has been said. The way you sum up things, the key points you give have to be strong, and you have to leave a strong message at the end for great impact. And also, state what action needs to go from here on. State the desired action that needs to be taken for perhaps the recommendations or things that have been discussed in the presentation to actually be implemented. So remember, you have your introduction, your body, and your conclusion. And they're all very important parts of the format. So let's take a look at your introduction and how are you going to get the attention of your audience. You can get the attention of your audience by many different ways, and it depends on the level of your experience and your skill in this area as to how you go about it. You could open your presentation, your introduction, with a question. That's a certain way to get attention. You could open it up with some dramatic facts or evidence that may make people sit up straight and start to wonder and think and listen to you. You could open your presentation with a set of statistics. Perhaps if you're talking about how to decrease smoking in teenagers, you might open your presentation with a set of statistics about how many teenagers under the age of such and such die every month because of smoking. That's just an example. You may have some anecdotes, some small things that you want to refer to that could be fun, that could be serious. You may want to say some things about yourself in your introduction. A little bit of personal history perhaps. That's not too revealing, but it's something that you might like to reveal. Could be that you want to use testimonials, words from others about certain things to open up your presentation, or a personal story. Perhaps you might have an involved activity where people get up and you have an ice-breaking activity to open your presentation. Ice-breaking activities, are not only meant for opening training sessions. You can have fun with these when you're opening up a presentation, depending on what that presentation is about. You could use analogies, examples of things that have happened that demonstrate the subject matter that you're going to bring up for discussion. Another attention getter definitely is using humour. But be careful here when you do use humour. Make sure that you're using it in the right sense and that it's not going to offend anyone. And make sure that it's funny, by the way. Sometimes people use humour and it falls flat. So in advance, prepare and make sure what you're saying is certainly funny. You might actually open the presentation with a puzzle, a brain teaser, something that gets people thinking and they are completely taken away by the fact that you're doing this and you're catching them immediately. It could be that you have a demonstration lined up. If you've got a product, you're talking about one of your products, perhaps you're talking about the weaknesses that have been apparent in this product. So you bring it on stage and you demonstrate that as the opener to your presentation. And also you can use various props. Things that are maybe fun or things that are informative. It could be a clock, it could be something that is relative to your particular subject of your presentation that you use. Maybe you're talking about lateness in the office and you want to bring in a new system by which you are going to change the way that people clock in, for example. So you could demonstrate this by using props. You could have a big clock perhaps at the end of your table, and this is a prop to demonstrate the fact that you are going to be talking about time. That's just one simple little example. But I'm sure you have many examples of these things. And once you start to begin to think about your content and think about your opener and how to get attention, then you can be very creative with this and you can make your presentation very, very successful and very, very different. And then it becomes very memorable. So, after you've opened and you've got the attention of your audience, then state the purpose of your presentation. Why are you there? And indeed, why is the audience there? Talk about the big picture first. Don't start to talk about all the details and the facts right away. Give them an overview of the big picture and what is in it for them. What are they going to gain and take away from this presentation? Also, let them know why what you are about to say is important. Let them know that, so they know what you're thinking. Let them know how this information will fit in with what they are doing and make perhaps their workplace more cooperative or smooth over certain problems, etc. that might be the subject of the presentation. How is this information going to fit in with what they do? How will it help them? How will it help those people in the audience? And also, in stating the purpose, let them know where they would use or apply this information. So give them this information about the purpose. Let them know clearly what it's all about. It might pay for you a little bit prior or at the opening of your presentation to start to analyze them. Find out what are their names, what are their titles, their backgrounds, their reason for attending, etc. Analyze your audience. You can ask them these questions if you like, or you can get this information prior to the actual presentation. Some people in presentations will have name tags, so you can identify them that way. But quite often I find it hard to read name tags. And I think it's quite nice, if it's a small group, to just ask them who they are and what their background is and why they're here today attending this presentation. It may pay to try to find out what their objectives are, what are their fears and things that cause them to flare up. What are their attitudes? If you are not doing this as you are talking to them, in the opening of your presentation, certainly you can find these things out prior to the meeting or prior to the presentation, depending on the subject. Get to know your audience. Get to know what your audience is interested in and what they actually want. This, of course, depends on the type of seminar or type of presentation you are giving. You need to know also what they already know and need to know. So that's a very important thing. Don't go in there and tell them things that they already know. That's not going to be useful to them. So you need to find out prior to what it is they already know so you can give them information that's additional to that. What are their needs and expectations from this presentation? Get to know the audience's needs and how will the audience benefit from this presentation. What is their perception of you and your institution? It may pay that you find this out before you have your guests arrive. Perhaps in some way in the week up leading to your presentation, depending on the subject, you may need to find these sorts of things out. This information, as I'm going through, can be found out at different stages. Usually you try to find it out before the presentation, or you have people give you feedback as you are going through the presentation of this information. What are their questions likely to be? Mr. A, for example, is a very tough operator. He is a customer who really demands the best of everything. So when you're presenting new product lines to him, you need to be prepared for the kinds of questions people like Mr. A are going to ask. What is at stake for your audience? What is going to happen as a result of this for your audience? And also, how much detail do they need? All of these things are getting to know your audience, analysing your audience, understanding quite deeply, right from the beginning if you can, who you are talking to. And when you get to know your audience, you can really feel more confident and more prepared for your presentation. So you need to also, in your preparation, define what action you want the audience to take afterwards. You need to find out what they feel and believe and do after hearing your talk or after hearing your speech. What action are they going to take after they listen to you? These are important things to know. Once you've understood who your audience is, what action do you think they're going to take afterwards? Or what action do you want them to take afterwards? Get them involved. Involve the audience if there is time. Ask questions and call on different people in the group to give their opinions if possible. If people are not volunteering their questions very easily, then you can call on people. You could say, that young man down there on the right-hand side in the very nice blue shirt. Can I have your attention? Would you like to give your opinion on da-da-da? You can call on different individuals and have them get involved that way. Or you can have small group activities so people get involved and have a bit of fun in the presentation time. Repeat what they say. That gets the audience involved as well because you're giving feedback to them. And write responses as they're given to show importance to those responses up on the whiteboard or the flip chart. That's a good technique to use, and it means that you're getting the audience involved every step of the way or as they give their opinions if it's something you want to highlight. So in giving your presentation, we've gotten to the first step, the introduction and getting your audience involved, knowing your audience, and then knowing what you really want them to do as a result of this presentation. So we're coming now to the way to present, to decide whether you use visual aids, whether you use an overhead projector, for example, or whether you use flip charts, whether you use whiteboards, etc., or whether you use PowerPoint, use computers. Why use them? Indeed, why do you use them? Do they give you impact? Do they add to your presentation? How do you use them? Are they difficult to use? Do they create more problems than they're worth? And do you feel comfortable using them, by the way? That's something else to consider. Do you actually feel comfortable using these visual aids? And how do you create these visual aids to be effective? People are more likely to be persuaded because you do use visual aids. This is something well worth remembering. So when you ask yourself why use visual aids, it's because people are visual. When people listen, they like to see something as well. They remember very, very clearly what they see. If you send somebody off to a tourist operator, a tourist agent, and in that tour office there are beautiful posters up on a wall, and at the same time that the agent is talking to the person looks around and they see all these beautiful pictures of the countries and the destinations they want to visit. It's highly likely that that person will make up their mind to travel because they've seen visually the beauty that they're going to be going to. And this is a very powerful thing. So it translates also when people are using visual aids. We like to see something up on a wall. We like to see as well as listen. So people are 43% more likely to be persuaded and convinced of something if they can see something used in a visual aid. Visual aids also make your ideas easier to understand. Sometimes explaining something might not be so easy, but when you put it up in a picture or a graph or a pie chart or whatever, then people can instantly see, aha, that's what she's talking about. Now I understand. So it validates the explanation and it makes it very easy to understand. There's also an important point to note here. People will remember perhaps 85% of everything we learn comes from the information we take in visually, and we are more inclined to remember things purely because there was some visual aid demonstrating it, or you used PowerPoint, or a very colourful chart. One picture, by the way, is worth 8 minutes of talking. Did you know that? So if you put a chart up or a picture up or a slide in a PowerPoint presentation, it's very colourful and full of graphics or something like that, that is worth 8 minutes of talking at least. So that's a very, very, very valuable aid in your presentation. And don't forget, all of these things are your notes. So as you're putting them up, it's helping you recall what you are trying to say as well. Plus you have, from your rehearsal and your preparation time, memorized a lot of the things that you want to say. But visual aids can help you as a presenter, very much so. So let's have a look at some basic visual aid guidelines. These are quite simple guidelines, but sometimes we do overlook them. Make sure that everybody in the room can actually see. So if there are things in the way or people are moved around to the side of the projector screen, then they may not be able to see so well. So always ensure that everybody can see. So just ask that question. Is this clear for everybody? Would you like the lights dimmed down so you can see it more clearly? Ask those things. Also, when you're using visual aids, don't forget to speak to the audience as well. Don't speak to your visual aids. That's a very important point to remember. Your audience is out there. They're the ones you need to connect with. That's where your eye contact should go most of the time. So speak to the audience, not to the screen, not to the wall. And with your visual aids, make them big and simple. Make them colourful and eye-catching. You know, the attention span of people is very minimal. And so when they're looking at things, they need to immediately be able to grasp what is going on. Otherwise, they get bored and their minds wander, and then you've lost them. So ensure that you do your best effort to make the visual aids very eye-catching and very, very attractive. Possible visual aids you can use are flip charts or PowerPoint presentation. Overhead projectors as well are frequently used. Slides, a slide projector for certain kinds of presentations. Videotape and video shows can be used. Other things, don't forget, not necessarily electronic, but demonstrations. Actual physical demonstrations are visual aids. Computer printouts as well are visual aids, as are wall charts and reports. All of these sorts of things can help your presentation and can be used as aids. And it's important to remember that when you are using visual aids such as PowerPoint or flip charts or boards, etc., then they should really be on the left-hand side of the speaker. That is a personal matter of choice, really. But if you start out with this basic rule or basic guideline, it will help you to plan how you work with your visual aids. And don't forget, working with visual aids is sometimes a difficult thing. You have to practice. Not only practice talking about the subject or the content of your presentation, but you do need to practice working with the visual aids. Visual aids are also not the star of the show, so do remember that. They are there to help you, but you are the one who has the greatest impact with the way that you communicate. So please do remember that point. Sometimes we rely too heavily on the visual aids, but if you remember that point and that you are important, you are the presenter, then you will have a better success rate with your presentation. So when you're using visual aids, think of these design concepts. Keep writing big, keep it simple, and keep it clear. Whatever makes it easier for the audience to see things, that is what you should be aiming towards. So this is the concept you should approach. Big meaning you should be able to read everything from the back row, if possible, and at least 28 point, preferably 36 point size in your fonts. You can use the floor test to check this out. So you can walk to the back and then you can try to read it yourself when you're rehearsing your presentation. So keep things big. If things are too tiny, people can't read them, they're too messy, your attention span of your audience drops and you've lost them. Keep things simple. Generally speaking, no more than 6 lines on a slide is the way to go. 6 lines on a slide and perhaps 6 words to that line as well, or 7 words. We call it the 6-6 rule. But generally, if you're going to be presenting something and you want to present very effectively in front of that meeting or in front of that audience, try to keep to these simple guidelines. The number of slides, well, 1 slide can equal about 2 to 3 minutes. Use image slides less, because otherwise you're just putting up a series of pictures. You do need to have some information on your slide, up to 6 lines and 6 or 7 words to each line. And as you are going through your slides in your PowerPoint, time yourself. Really time yourself, and then leave time for questions after each slide, just in case people do want to ask a question. I'm not saying that every slide you have to ask questions after, but just remember that you do need to allow a little bit of time when you're timing the whole presentation. There are a few rules we need to follow when we're using text, when we're using the words. So put your talk into speaker notes. Try not to write such wordy notes for yourself. Make sure that you've got clear, concise points there that you can follow. And as I said before, 6 lines per slide, 6 words up to 7 perhaps to a line. Quotations are okay. They're very fine to use, so don't worry about that. Sometimes they can be very powerful, so long as your whole presentation is not overcome by too many quotations. Try not to use full sentences. Try to make your text in point format. And you can delete articles such as the or a or an, because you are actually doing the speaking. You are the one who is doing the presentation. So the idea of the slide is to more or less be a prompt, to be a tool that helps you with your narration. And also illustrate concepts. Illustrate them with some graphs or graphics, charts, things like that, that you can put on your slides. Be clear in your concepts, be very, very clear. And the choices, or the preferred choice, is of fonts Arial or Helvetica. These fonts are very clear when they're up on a projector screen. And we can also say that blue background with yellow text is also very, very powerful. If you want to have a change from using white as your background, blue also as your headers or your footers, etc., can be very, very powerful and are very, very clear. Avoid overuse of red or shadows or animation or transitions, and beware of too many busy backgrounds. Sometimes these distract and they're not very powerful, and they take away from the words that you're trying to say and the things that you're talking about. Also, being clear means adding some clip art if you want. These things look great, so long as you use them in the right way and you don't become too busy with them. And of course, the size is in relation to the words is very balanced on that slide.